Hey folks, thank you for joining me today. Today I'm going to take you a little bit in the background and I'm going to talk to you about experimental work that I've been doing on hot honey. I've had hot honey on the market for about a year. As you all know, I'm sort of obsessed with that product and I keep trying to improve it. I think I've done it. So today I'm reproducing samples to send for testing to the University of New Mexico, and I'm going to take you along on the journey. So let's get with it. Hey folks, this is Phil from Alabama Hot Sauce. That's alabamahotsauce.com on the web. Today I'm going to take you on a little research and development journey. We're going to talk about hot honey and my finally arriving at what I believe is the final formula that will now be on the market permanent at Alabama Hot Sauce. Now, all of you may know that I have had hot honey on the market for a while. I've had it on the market with 3 or 4 different manufacturing methods. It varied slightly each time. I was subject to a lot of natural changes that I could do nothing about. But I've been working on a formula that I think is going to solve all of those problems. I'm now going to be able to make a nearly unadulterated hot honey product. That product is going to be the consistency of normal running honey. And on top of that, I believe that the moisture content and the capsaicin content and the Scoville reading of this hot honey will be the same from bottle to bottle, the batch to batch, and it'll be unchanging. Mostly because of the methods that I'm going to explain to you. Now, before we get started, I want to tell you that first, some of the things that I am doing here might not be suitable for doing in a home kitchen. I want you folks to understand that I have the ability to make a tremendous number of measurements. I can measure moisture content very, very accurately. I can measure sucrose content and glucose content of the honey very, very accurately. In addition to that, I have viscosity measurements I can make. And I have some equipment that you might or might not have in your home kitchen. So I want to first give you that warning. Some of the things I'm doing might not be suitable for you in a home kitchen. One of the things that is uniquely different about this particular research I've done on this hot honey is how I impart the heat to it. There are a number of ways you can do it. I see people on YouTube putting dry pepper flakes in their honey. That doesn't look very good. It doesn't work very good. I don't know how they keep it distributed. I see people soaking or boiling their honey in fresh peppers. When you do that, it becomes almost water thin and is subject to food pathogens. I've seen people use dried peppers and soaking them for months and months in dried peppers. That's inconsistent in the Scoville rating. And I've seen people make attempts to use capsaicin extract, which you can buy on the market. And the problem with that is capsaicin extract tastes horrible. So what I need to be able to do is I need to be able to get capsaicin into the honey in a very consistent way that is not subject to variation from pepper to pepper and season to season. And I need to do it in a way that protects honey's natural ability to ward off food pathogens. Now, for those of you that don't know, honey is considered safe forever. And as a matter of fact, it's exempt from FDA rules for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is a foreign product. So the FDA does not regulate foreign products. That is regulated by the USDA. The USDA simply says, as long as honey is unadulterated, it is exempt and it can be sold like any other vegetable or crop grown on a farm directly to a consumer. So when you see a farmer at a farmer's market selling honey, he's not had to have any approval. All he has to have is a USDA grower's permit, just like he has to have for his cabbage, his squash, his onions, his potatoes, his tomatoes, and all the other things. So I want to make the honey unadulterated because I don't want to damage any of the characteristics that naturally give honey prophylactic protection against pathogens. Unadulterated is a difficult word. The USDA and the FDA define unadulterated as honey that has been exposed to nothing more than filtering and or pasteurizing. Okay? So what I want to do is I want to be able to add capsaicin to honey, which basically makes it an adulterated product. So the honey that I sell requires FDA filings. I have to meet FDA requirements, just like any other food. But what I want to do is I want to do it in such a way that that adulteration does not impact the reasons why honey is so safe. And let's talk about them. Honey is naturally safe because it is an acid food. Now, it is not very acid. The typical pH of honey is in the range of 4.1 to 4.5. Even though it's classified as an acid food, it is considered unadulterated as an acid food because it has a pH below 4.6. In addition to that, honey possesses a characteristic that motor oil possesses, and that is it is such high viscosity and such low moisture content that it makes it impossible for pathogens to grow in the honey. Now, honey may have spores of pathogens in it, especially botulism. It's why one of the warnings that comes with fresh honey is never feed it to a child 1 year or younger, because that child might not have the ability to fight off botulism in its spore configuration. In addition to that, honey has a moisture of about 15 to 17%. At 18% or 18.5%, honey will self-ferment. It contains yeast. All is necessary for fermentation is yeast, sugar, and moisture. So above about 18.5%, the honey becomes wet enough, it's sweet enough, and there's a pathogen in it, naturally yeast, which the bees bring into the hive, so it will self-ferment. All it has to do is gain a couple of percent of moisture from the way it comes out of the hive. So what I also want to do is when I add stuff to this honey to make it a hot honey, I want to do it so that I can lower the pH a little more, because I want to get it below 4.0 if I can. And I don't want to add so much moisture that it will ferment. Now, to protect it from fermenting, the safest thing to do is to pasteurize it. Raw honey and the yeast that's in it will pasteurize at about 140 degrees, somewhere between 140 and 150 degrees. Now, in addition to that, raw honey will take on a caramelized taste at about 160 degrees. I don't want that. I want my product to taste like raw honey with heat added. I don't want it to ferment, so I'm going to have to pasteurize my honey, get it at least to 140 to 150 degrees without going up to 160, which will cause it to take on a caramelized taste. So what I've got here is I've got a pot of honey. As you can see, it's thin because it is heated to 140 degrees. Now, I'm heating this honey on a 3,500 watt induction heating plate that is base temperature control, meaning it controls the temperature of the thick base of this pot to 140 degrees plus or minus 2 degrees. So I'm sure I'm not getting up to that 160 that will start to taste caramelized, and I'm sure I'm at least 140 degrees, which will kill the yeasts in it so we won't have fermentation. Okay? What I'm going to show you is a good portion of this, how I have determined that this hot honey should be made. Now, honestly, I consider this a proprietary part of my process, not that someone else couldn't figure it out, but I was very reluctant when I was thinking about making this video to go out and share much of it. So I'm going to tell you what I did and how I did it. I'm going to show you exactly what I'm doing. Today I'm going to be making 3 samples for submission to the University of New Mexico to have various things tested in. I'm going to have the sugar content, the pH, the Scoville tested in it, and I want to make sure all 3 of these samples are the same. Forgive me if I don't give you actual measurements of the things I put in here, okay? I will tell you as much as I can, but to be honest, I don't need to give this away. And if you are a recreational viewer, I don't think you need to know it anyway because, as I've said, I'm not positive without some pretty serious controls that this is a method you should use at home. So I don't think not adding these details will help. Now, I'm going to make this hot honey, these 3 8-ounce jar or 10-ounce jars that I'm going to send the University of New Mexico for submission. I'm going to make them out of 3 ingredients. First, I'm going to be using honey. Second, I'm going to be using pure distilled vinegar. And thirdly, I'm going to be using Capsaicin Oil. Now, I want to point out to you that Capsaicin Oil and capsaicin extract are not the same thing, and I'm going to explain a little bit about how they're not. Capsaicin extract is essentially peppers which have been placed in a solvent of some sort. The 2 most common solvents of food sources are food-safe glycerin and alcohol, okay? Capsaicin extract, the type that you see for sale on eBay, on Amazon, at various places that individuals are selling, is a capsaicin product which has been extracting from the peppers using a solvent. The problem with capsaicin extract is that it tastes horrible. And when I say horrible, anybody out who's ever bought any of it and tried to use it in a hot sauce they make at home know exactly what I'm talking about. They say, hey, I can tell instantly if a hot sauce has extract in it. And they're exactly right, so can I. Now, what I'm doing is slightly different. I believe the horrible taste of capsaicin extract is a result of the solvents. You can't completely remove the solvents from it without turning it into a solid block, because the same process that would remove the solvents completely would remove characteristics of the capsaicin oil, and it would make it solid. Now, let's talk about how I got this capsaicin. And I'll try to show you a picture on the screen to demonstrate what I'm talking about. If you cut open a super hot pepper, not only is there capsaicin embedded in the seed pod and the placenta of that pepper, in super hots, it's huddled on the inside of the pepper. If you take a sharp knife and you scrape that puddle of reddish yellow, reddish orange capsaicin out onto a table, you'll have pure, unadulterated capsaicin. Now, pure unadulterated capsaicin is very, very thick. So, using it is a little bit difficult. To be able to use it in foods, we need for it to be somewhat runny. So the way I made my capsaicin oil, and by the way, I actually have this for sale on my website. Number one, it was cheaper. I'm not buying expensive food grade glycerin to make it. But secondly, it allows me to process it in a way that I don't get that bad taste that I think comes from the solvents we use to extract the capsaicin. So what I did is I opened peppers. In the case of the current peppers I have, it was ghost peppers. I opened the peppers and I scraped out capsaicin oil. As a matter of fact, I scraped out roughly, in my first batch, about 35 ounces of it. And by the way, that took a lot of peppers to scrape that out. Now, when I did that, it was a thick, oily substance, which had a Scoville of way, way, way on up there in the millions. Because it was pure oil, it wasn't diluted by pepper flesh. But I had to make it a little bit liquid. Now, I had a couple of ways I could make it liquid. I could make it liquid by diluting it in vinegar, or I could do an even better thing. I can make it liquid by diluting it in the juice from peppers. In addition to that, the juice from those peppers moves a little bit more capsaicin into it. So I took this capsaicin oil I'd extracted in a container, and I then squeezed the peppers. I did it in an apple crusher, as a matter of fact, into the container, which made a very, very, very liquid substance. The juice that I squeezed out didn't have much capsaicin in it, and it wasn't very hot because I'd already scraped the capsaicin out of pepper. So what I then did is I put this concoction, capsaicin and the juice from the peppers, on a hot plate at about 120 degrees, and I let it reduce. And it reduced down to a consistency about like this. It was water before, but as you can see, it has a little bit of grab there. I then sent this capsaicin to the University of New Mexico for a Scoville test, and they tested it at slightly over 1.2 million Scoville. So I then bottled it in little 1 ounce bottles, and I labeled it as 1 million Scoville to be safe, because there could be slight variation in future batches I produce. To be safe, and I put it up for sale. And by the way, I've sold a lot of it, especially at my farmers markets. I've probably sold a couple of dozen bottles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this stuff to impart the heat into my honey. Now, let's talk about why this is better than using pepper. Number one, this has very little moisture in it. Very, very little. It's under 10% moisture. Best of all, it has a water activity of about 5.7. Nothing can grow in 5.7. So when I put it in here, it's going to be a very small amount because it's so hot. I'm not going to need or worry about a tremendous amount of moisture leaching out into my honey, which raises the moisture level and makes it subject to pathogen growth and fermentation. Furthermore, I've got my honey sitting over here at 140 degrees, so I'm killing the yeast, so that's going to stop fermentation. But I am going to do one more thing. My pH will not quite be down where I want it. Remember I told you, because this is considered adulterated honey, I'm adding something to it that I now have to, it's no longer pure honey, I now have to meet the FDA requirements for this honey, just like everybody else should do if they market hot honey, because they're putting something in it. So to do that, I want to lower the pH. I want to get down away from that 4.2, 4.3. This particular honey I've got, which is North Alabama honey, I tested it. It was like 4.3. I want to get it down there a little bit. So I'm going to add a very small amount of vinegar to this product to lower the pH. And my tests show that the pH goes down to about 3.7 when I do this. In addition, this product is going to be made so that each of these three elements are introduced to the jars individually. So this is not something I'm going to mix up in a big batch and then fill jars. I'm going to put these components in every jar I sell. I'm then going to top it with honey. I'm going to shake it. This combination of the capsaicin oil and the pepper juice and the vinegar makes it soluble. So once I shake it up and it dissolves in this honey, it's going to be good to go. So I'm going to show you how this process works. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, I got 3 10-ounce, or they're actually 8-ounce jars, but with honey in them, they weigh 10 ounces. So I'm going to put pure white vinegar in each of these. Okay? Now, you see, I put the 2 scoops in there. I hadn't told you what a scoop is, but hey, you'll probably figure it out. I'm putting 2 scoops in each jar. I've now set the stage to lower the pH of this product so that I feel comfortable publishing it with the FDA. Okay? Now, the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little syringe and I'm going to draw out capsaicin oil, and I'm going to put it in this honey. So whatever size this syringe is, I'm putting 2 of them in it. I know what it is, okay? I'm doing something else that I would never suggest. I'm dealing with this product with bare hands. I'm telling you, if you get this on your hands, if you do, you're not gonna like it. This will be absolutely miserable to you. I'm taking the chance because when I'm using this little syringe, I fumble a little bit wearing gloves. So, there we got some vinegar, some capsaicin oil that's of my own creation. I've got the right amount. I've tested this over and over and over. As a matter of fact, here are 3 jars of about 10 I've tested. Each of them have different amounts of vinegar, different amounts of capsaicin in it. So I'm determining which one I want it to taste like. And now I am making that particular formula, which happened to have been this amount of vinegar, this amount of capsaicin oil, and I'm sending it over to the University of New Mexico to do a number of tests. Now, let's take a look at my honey. My honey's 140 degrees. I check it to verify it. That's exactly what it is. So I'm really, really, really happy. And so now I'm going to dispense this honey into a measuring cup for pouring. If I'm correct, 3 scoops and a smidgen of oil is going to do it, because I'm using an 8 liquid ounce measuring fluid. I'm not a dipper. I'm not totally filling it up every time, so I'll put a little air in there. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour this warm honey into these jars. I know exactly where I have to put it to guarantee at least 10 ounces of honey in here, which is what I have to certify to the FDA. But I was off a little bit, but so we'll just put a little more in there. There we go. So now I've got 3 jars. Each would have 10 ounces by weight of honey. They each have the capsaicin oil. They each have vinegar. Now, before we cap anything, we use our quart solution to wipe down the jar, the threads. By the way, even at 140 degrees, it's still hot, so be very careful. Now, just as a side note, I'm in my regular little manufacturing area here, in case you hadn't noticed, and I'm sure those of you who might make sauce at home, anytime you make hot sauce or do anything that involves a lot of vinegar or a lot of fermentation, the fruit flies come out in mass. So you see a fruit fly landing on the cannellines or flying around, understand that I do everything. I got traps, vinegar traps at all over this place to trap them, but there ain't much you can do to stop fruit flies. You can go 50 years in your house and never see one, and then you can pour a glass of vinegar out, leave it on the stove, and you'll have 5 or 10 dead fruit flies in at the bar. I don't know where they come from, but they come there. Now I'm going to shake this stuff. There we go. Now, this is really thin. I assume you can see how easy that runs. That's because it is warm, okay? This is the product after it cools. If you notice, it flows exactly like honey. As a matter of fact, in my test, the viscosity doesn't change even one little bit. On this particular one, I use a number 2 on cup. And that number 2 on cup in pure honey ran in 19.2 seconds. In this honey, it ran in 18.6 seconds. So that is essentially the same viscosity. I've tasted it. You get no taste from caramelization, even though the caramelized taste of honey is good. I may one day bargain and sell slightly caramelized honey. It's a wonderful taste. I just don't want it in this product. Secondly, I got no taste from the heating method. But the most important thing is I got hardly no taste from the vinegar. So the vinegar is serving its purpose without changing the taste. The capsaicin was serving its purpose without changing the taste. And of course, the honey is always serving its purpose. Now, the only downside to this product is there may be in 1 out of 10 jars a little piece of the capsaicin oil that is solidified. It would come apart with a lot of shaking. The shaking is going to be hard once the vinegar turns to this solid substance, okay? And so actually on my label, I'm going to have to put a note because I did notice in the first production test I did, by the way, I've already done a production test for this. I produced 60 bottles. I did notice 2 of the 60 bottles had this little black speck in it. Right? None of these do, but 2 of the 60 I made had it in it. I took it out. It's perfectly natural. It's nothing but capsaicin oil. Matter of fact, I took it out and ate it because I thought maybe, so leave, what could it be? Trust me, it's capsaicin oil. It burned me up. Just a little speck of it come good. Now, I hope what you're going to be seeing in the very future, matter of fact, I know what you're going to be seeing in the very future. Once my test results come back, you're going to be seeing the final, what I think it's a final recipe for Alabama hot sauce, hot honey. It's going to be available in a mild version, and it's going to be available in a super hot version. One of the cool things about this process is I can now regulate any way I want the temperature of this product. If you were to follow me up and say, Phil, I like that hot honey now, but I'd like it twice that hot. The next time I run a production run, I could actually make you a jar twice that hot. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to do that, but I'm saying I simply could because I have developed a chart which tells me if you put this much capsaicin in a 10-ounce net weight jar, this much, and I've plotted the curve for how the heat works. So in theory, I could go anywhere on that curve and deliver you a particular Scoville unit. So I think that's pretty unique, okay? Now, folks, I want to thank you for joining me. Like I said, I've told you a little bit about the inside baseball here. I was reluctant to do it. I'd like for you to reward me for this by subscribing to my channel. If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up. And while you're at it, ring that bell so YouTube will know to notify you each time I publish a new video. And I'm putting them out pretty regularly. I do something not a lot of people do. I show you sometimes a lot of things about the inside part of the business of making hot sauce. And I think from the growing nature of my channel, I think people are starting to enjoy it. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Hey folks, thank you for joining me on this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you would, push the little logo button at the top of your screen and join my channel. In addition to that, I've left 2 video suggestions I think you might enjoy. Punch them and take a look. Once again, folks, thank you.